This is Creative Banter. My recent interview with Talking Landscape Photography has me thinking about the ways we organize our photographs for presentation, particularly the debate between online galleries and the recent trend of free ebooks. This is especially pertinent as I work to revamp my website, as well as edit through the year-long backlog that is built up. And now that I have the freedom of digital with a system I am quite enjoying, the likelihood of my creating work more frequently has only gone up. An overarching question which remains when thinking about this, however, is whether my hunger for photographs will ever be satiated. Let's dive right into this, shall we? I think it's funny. I did with David Kingham, another interview. This one's with Talking Landscape Photography. It's one of the YouTube, or primarily like a YouTube-based podcast, I think. Normally they're recording live with a guest, but since they're in Australian time, it's a little difficult to do that because, it would be like 3 a.m.
difference
for our time in the United States or whatever. Whereas it's like 7 p.m. or whatever or 7 a.m. whatever time. It's a major pain. But regardless,
that's a weird one too, because it's like it's a different day and then it's like a wildly different time. It's a strange one.
Yeah. It was like when we recorded, it was Thursday for us. Yeah, because it was the last Thursday that we recorded it. So it was a major day of talking for me, which I'm not used to, not a fan of.
Yeah.
But it was 6 o'clock my time, so 6 in the evening my time, and then 10 in the morning Friday for them.
Yeah. Which
they were like, yeah, it's definitely a weird thing to be recording that early for them, when normally it's like switched. But
I always have a really tough time putting my mind around that time difference. I mean, like when it comes to compared to, from here to Europe or stuff like that, that's an easy enough one. But that one just throws me for a loop. I'm like, I just have to I have to look at it like visually in order to understand that difference.
Yeah. It was funny too, because David texted me on Wednesday afternoon, and he was like, are you ready to record? Are you ready to do this? And I'm like, wait a minute, we're on different pages here because of that time difference being so drastic. And he thought that it was going to be Wednesday, that it was supposed to be Wednesday night, not Thursday night. So we were all screwed up. And I mean, I'm a little bit more.
Plus, you and David are probably in different time zones as well, right?
Yeah. He's over in Mountain Time, so he's. What is that? 2 hours behind? Yeah, 2 hours behind me, somewhere around that. So, I mean, I'm a little bit more used to big time changes like that because of following Craig's work and the live videos that he does and trying to keep track of that. But even then, I mean, once it gets to 12 plus hour time changes, things get a little weird. I can never keep track.
Yeah.
But
so did the recording? You can tell my brain isn't working great today. So did the recording go well and everything?
Yeah, it seemed to. I think it's should be live by the time that this one goes live as well, for people to listen to. So if it is, I'll throw a show notes link. So. But yeah, I mean, overall, it went well. I always like those interviews where it's more conversation-based, kind of free-flowing, instead of just one question after another, stereotypical kind of thing. So
yeah.
So it was funny too, because at one point, towards the last bit of it, the hosts, Luke Sharkey and Benjamin Mays, they went through David's portfolio and were commenting on some of his work, sharing his work, because of having that video aspect. That makes it really nice too. You can actually show everything.
Great for the presentation side of things.
Yeah. And then we spent maybe like, I don't know, it felt like maybe half an hour on David's portfolio going through all of his stuff. And then we get to my website and it's like, oh, here's like 5 photos. and of course, one of them, I don't remember if I just didn't upload the right file to it or if it was just really sloppy editing on my part. But the one file has like dust markings and everything on it, just poor cleanup. And Ben was like, so is this like purposeful, like more of one of those aesthetic kind of choices that you made here to keep it in? Or I'm like, no, it's just lazy editing. I'm like, oops. But I mean, it definitely, like, seeing that difference though, definitely has me thinking how I want to like put out more work and that kind of deal, and how I want to present my work going forward. Because David recently has been following that. I don't want to necessarily call it a trend, but it kind of is, of putting your work in like ebook form, because you can control the presentation a lot better instead of like
for sure
online galleries. So I'm kind of thinking how I want to go about things. And now with the Fuji and playing around more with that, I'm absolutely going to be putting out more work than the 2 or 3 images that I normally do each year from big trips.
Yeah.
And just figuring out how I want to organize them into collections or into little ebooks or whatever the case may be in that aspect. So we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's definitely an argument for both ways. I mean, just from the standpoint of the average viewer, probably not going to take time to download an ebook. Having the work accessible on the website, I think, is key. But then, as you had mentioned, it's a matter of having a more controlled presentation in the ebook form. But I also feel like that, a person downloads an ebook and maybe it just goes to their downloads folder and they don't do anything else with it. And it just kind of sits there and nothing ever really happens to it beyond the initial viewing of it. So I can see an argument for having both ways of doing things, to provide the better, a decent experience for both types of people in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved how Brooke Jensen does his Kokoro series, and that's something that's always, like, you can still view it online because you don't have to necessarily download it. It could just pop up in Adobe Reader or whatever the equivalent is in your browser.
Yeah.
So that was always nice because you can kind of skim through that and look through it without it getting lost in download folders. Like, I have a couple that I haven't looked at.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's just, my brain is like fried. I've been dealing with migraines all week because of the weather and stuff. It's not a good time, but yeah.
So no early spring for you guys out there. Is that the case?
No,
or is it trying and it's just fluctuating?
Yeah, it's trying.
Yeah.
Like, this past weekend was gorgeous. We went out for, did we do two different walks in the woods, I think? Got a couple of nice photographs, what seemed to be nice, at least from the LCD. And then I think Monday was nice, but then Tuesday and Wednesday were just super rainy, just dreary weather. Today has been a mix, all in like the high 40s to high 50s. So temperature-wise, it's great. It feels like spring.
Yeah.
But it's just that the weather is fluctuating so much between rain and shine that it's not good for my head. It's bad. But I'm waiting for it. I know that we're going to get one more snowstorm. At least one more snowstorm we're going to get. I'm almost positive of it. And it's just going to appear suddenly. But
yeah. Are any of the trees starting to show some buds of new leaves coming in yet? I don't know when that happens in your neck of the woods.
I haven't noticed anything on the trees, but I know that I think there are tulips that I had planted around the fire pit and everything. They are starting to crop up a little bit, but
good.
Yeah. It's weird. Like, I never truly know what to expect in terms of timing, like for any of this stuff. And it always seems early, but I guess it's not too early, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy that it's already March.
Yeah.
I'm not okay with that. I know that you are, because you're like, bring on the warm weather, bring on the good times. But it's just, it's so, we've just had such a strange winter. And, it had been so warm and lots of rain, and then suddenly it got a bit cold. And last time we recorded, I was just about to head off to Zion and Death Valley on a trip, because we had this monster storm that came through, and just lots of wind, and it was a cold one. And so it was just really weird because, here it is early March, and I'm heading off on a potential winter trip, yet the trees in my front yard, they're starting to leaf in. I've got the, flowers coming in, all kinds of very spring-like stuff here. And I realized it was the first time, I think it's the first time I've been to Zion during the month of March. And when I got there, I realized that the mandatory shuttle service that goes up the main canyon, that was running again, a couple days after I got there. And so it's just on paper, when I got there, the washes didn't have any water in them or any ice in them, because it wasn't quite cold enough, and they hadn't had any rain lately. And so I was hoping that I'd get some snow and I'd get some ice to work with. And the storm came through. It got really windy, a bit of sleet falling. There was some rain, but it wasn't cold enough for ice. And it was really windy, so it was hard to really take any photos. But it was a strange trip. And I was thinking, like, I haven't had a bad trip in a while. I haven't had that trip where I come back from, I'm like, oh, shouldn't have gone. And on paper, this really should have been a trip like that. But it was a good trip. It was weird. I took 2 photos. And I have no clue how they turned out. I have my doubts on the exposure on one of them, and I have my doubts on the light on another one. But all the things that were working against me when it comes to the photography side of things, the lack of ice, the lack of snow, the strong wind. I mean, the wind, it was pretty invigorating being out there. But then the shuttle bus going again on my final day in Zion, because I went like 3 days before I even pulled the camera out. But then after I took those photos, I was pretty good. I'm like, here we have now a nice warm day in Zion. It was like, 60 something degrees. It hadn't rained enough or at least it had rained a little bit, but the roads had dried out. The shuttle bus was running again. I'm like, wait a minute, this is like perfect biking weather. So I was able to get a ride in on the bike, and it was actually great that the shuttles were running, because it meant that the road was wide open and there weren't really enough visitors on the roads in terms of like on their bikes and stuff. So I kind of had the roads all to myself. So even though from a photo trip standpoint, it would seem like it was not a great trip, I think because I had the bike with me, it just gave me that different perspective, which was pretty nice. And then I went to Death Valley after that, just for one day. And I did one ride there, which I was hoping to do when I was there previously. But that particular road was closed because they had some rain and had to go through and sweep the road and clear everything out. And that was a very fun ride. It's like a roller coaster. You climb up this one-way road. For those that are listening that are familiar, it's the Artist's Drive, where it's this one lane road that you start with this big climb where you climb up about 1,100 feet. And it's a really deceiving grade because it starts kind of a low grade, and the higher you go, the steeper it gets. And so it's really difficult to judge how much energy you have left in the tank versus how much you need to finish the climb. So it was killing me by the end of it. It was tough. But then you have the downhill where it's like these twisty turns through these badland canyons and all kinds of fun stuff. Though I did blow my tire on the way down. So I got the experience of being on the side of the road, changing out an inner tube in my tire.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah. But I will say that compared to my previous experience in Death Valley, where I had the campsite poached and had to deal with all that, I'd say, there weren't a ton of cars that went by on this one lane road through these canyons and stuff where I was on the side of the road with my bike upside down, working on it. But nearly all the cars that went by stopped and asked if I needed help, which was nice. Gives a little more faith in mankind.
Yeah. I mean, they were probably just asking if you needed help because they wanted to commandeer your bike, but still.
That's true. That's true. One of those groups did look a little familiar.
Yeah.
Driving a big black lifted truck and,
Yeah. Steal your campsite. Then next week, steal your bike.
Steal my bike. And just let me just wander through Death Valley in my bike shoes that are kind of like tap dancing shoes.
Well, there you go. So, you can be the tap dancer found in spandex in Death Valley.
Yeah. But it was kind of interesting because I think if I had gone on a trip like that in years past, and if I didn't have the bike and if I had all the pressure on me, I would have walked away from that trip saying, this was a bad trip. This was a bad experience. I shouldn't have done this. But I walked away from this one feeling like, oh man, that was great. That was fun. And so it's interesting. I think part of it is a sign of personal growth. I think some of it is just, a different sort of expectations. But it was good. But now I realize I have a lot of work ahead of me, between the videos, the photos, putting all the gear away. I got to do taxes. I've got so much stuff to do. So I'm going to be busy for a long time.
Yeah. Taxes alone. That's fun times. I keep being reminded about them coming up and I just keep wanting to push them off. Don't want to do anything with them. But
yeah,
that's
I'm quite organized with that stuff, but I still know that it's going to be a day of me just sitting there plugging through everything. I'm very good with regard to putting all of the income I have into the accounting software, but I'm not really good at putting all the expenses in. So I have to go through and look up, all right, how much I spend on, the rolls of paper, the ink, the everything else that goes into everything, the shipping, everything. So I have to go through and put all that together. And then at that point, I finally figure out, how well I did for the year. And I do enjoy that part, kind of the measuring one's progress and seeing how everything turned out and everything on those lines. But yeah, it's a bit of a chore. Do you do your own taxes or how do you do that?
Yeah, I do my own. I have my girlfriend's dad is a CPA for.
Oh, that's convenient.
Yeah, exactly. He's a CPA for some hospital down in Tennessee that he works remotely for. So yeah, that definitely helps out quite a bit. He helped teach me and walks me through everything with doing taxes for my stuff. So not this tax season, but next tax season, I'm thinking is going to be a little bit easier because of everything I'm implementing this year with changing over to an LLC and setting up separate bank accounts and all that kind of stuff. So everything will be very separated. Should just be very easy to plug into whatever kind of tax software, whatever I want to use, or whatever, like Excel spreadsheets, that kind of thing, and then go from there. But yeah, I always try to keep pretty organized with it. It's just not something that I want to do.
I will say that the thought of being able to do, the photography stuff, but not have to deal with doing the taxes and everything else associated with it sure makes being retired sound nice.
Yeah.
But that's not going to happen anytime soon for me. But just having all the plus sides of the photography experience, but without as much of the back end work.
Yeah. I don't understand why I couldn't have grown up like in a family that's independently wealthy.
I know, right?
Like why'd I draw this straw before I was born? Like why'd I roll these die? It would have been nice to just be independently wealthy and go out on photography trips whenever I please and have someone else do whatever kind of taxes for the estate that need to get done and just go from there. But
yeah, though I don't know. I I think it would be nice in many ways, but I also feel like you wouldn't have that fire burning underneath you to be like pushing you to do something else. So I don't know, but also it'd be nice to sit by the pool and just relax under the Hawaiian sun. That'd be nice.
Yeah.
That'd be very nice.
Yeah. If only Hawaii wasn't so expensive.
Yeah.
That would definitely, I think that would be it. That could be the spot.
Yeah. So what else have you been up to over the past week? Any other insights from the job interview experience or anything else along those lines?
I haven't heard anything back from that job.
Not that you're necessarily expecting to, based on your experience.
Yeah, no, definitely not expecting to, but still haven't heard anything from them, like positive or negative, like affirmatively. Only other thing is just I'm trying to figure out like the editorial assistant, publishing assistant kind of route, since that's all a lot of remote work, and slowly putting in applications for that, seeing how that goes.
What sort of publications and organizations and stuff have those sort of openings? That's not something I'm as familiar with.
Penguin Random House is the biggest one that I've been looking at, which I know is like a huge thing, but I might have some connections that could help me out with getting a job through them. So I'm trying to leverage those where I can, but I don't know.
And that would be a remote work sort of thing?
Yeah. Most of them are remote work, and they're constantly putting out new applications, new positions and everything. It's just a lot of, for the most part, just helping with making sure everything goes smoothly during publication. So,
well, that's cool. Like what type of task does that involve?
Let me pull up one of the job listings. So, editorial assistant is one of the main ones that I'm looking at here. And you're pretty much providing administrative and editorial support across a variety of books, including like the literary and upmarket commercial fiction, narrative nonfiction, and memoir. Provides the opportunity to learn about the overall editorial process and the inner workings of a large publishing house. You're again, providing general administrative support, including scheduling meetings, routing contract and payment requests, generating profit and loss statements, maintaining deadlines, executing mailings, filing expense reports, and fielding questions from authors and literary agents, shepherding books through the publication process by formatting manuscripts for production, drafting transmittal memos and copyright forms, etc., etc., etc. So
just a whole host of things on the back end, really, to kind of get things organized and get things moving smoothly. Probably a lot of email writing, which you are very familiar with.
Absolutely. a lot of...
Just put that in the resume.
Exactly. Yeah. I write like hundreds of emails every day, so I'm really well suited for this job. I don't know. It's just something else to try, another direction to aim for, another path to walk down, and see if anything lands that way. Nothing super exciting in terms of the kind of work that it is, but I mean, I think it'd be pretty cool to work for a publishing house, at least for a little bit, to see where it takes me. But
yeah,
I don't know.
I guess the only downside to that really would be the fact that it is, I mean, there's a positive side to it as well, but since you would be working remotely, if something like that were to happen, it wouldn't necessarily give you some of the benefits of, working in the office environment and stuff that we talked about in the past episode.
Yeah.
But, it's at the same time, it's, maybe you'd have some dose of that just based on, like you said, if there's interacting with the authors and all that kind of stuff and everything else associated with that. So
yeah. I mean,
there could be some definite benefits to that.
Especially given that it's for Penguin, where they're centered in New York City. Like, I really don't want to drive into New York City every day or have to move there.
How far away is that from you? I'm not as familiar with the East Coast.
It's roughly 2 hours, I think.
Okay. That's like for me going to Los Angeles. That would be a heck of a commute.
Yeah, I think it's around like 2 hours, but yeah, it's not terrible. Like they have a couple of hybrid positions, and I contemplated those, but the biggest thing especially is that the money just isn't there for me to justify driving there all the time. And it definitely is not there for me to move to New York City, which
man, that's got to be crazy expensive.
I would never do anyway. Like years and years ago when I was first getting started with photography and I was more into the portrait and like fashion world, I thought like, oh, it'd be really cool to move to New York City because it's like, it's as crowded as it is. Everybody's very like independent and to themselves kind of vibe that you get there. And because of all the art scene and the art galleries and everything. But then you realize you're going to be paying $3,000+ a month for rent and like the low end of things and all of the logistics of everything. I'm just like, no, that's okay. I don't. Plus being surrounded by that many people all the time, regardless how like introverted everybody may tend to be, is just all the noise. Yeah, no, I'm good. So, yeah, so I'll just take my chances with completely remote work and find community elsewhere.
Yeah, I think that would be good. I don't know, like I've been to New York once. It was on, I think it was like a 8th grade school trip. Went there into Washington, D.C. And I don't know, I definitely see how if you have the means to live in a place like that, or if you're, there's like some degree of camaraderie among people when you have that sort of environment where everyone is having to work together with each other to kind of do everything. And that's something that's definitely missing in the more like suburb sort of areas where it's just everyone has their own little bubble in a way, and it's a different sort of bubble, I think, than in a city environment. But I don't know. I mean, I definitely see how there's a certain energy to being in a city like that, but yeah, that I don't know that I'd want to. I don't know that I'd ever necessarily want to go in that direction, but I definitely see the appeal to it.
Yeah, it all depends on what kind of work you're looking for and everything too, I guess. But yeah, so that's about it for the job search wise. Other than that, the one thing that I keep forgetting to mention, and I really should because it's nice that it's finally done. I mentioned about doing a zine for the Colorado photographs that I had taken.
Yeah. So tell me about that.
So that is officially put together.
Oh, cool.
I had some issues, as you know, with too dark of printing. It was atrocious. It was so bad.
Was it just like super muddy dark tones?
The highlights and midtones were fine on it. Even the shadows in some of the photographs seemed to be okay. It's just that it was just like the printer was putting on way too much black in areas that really shouldn't have had that deep of blacks. Like, to the point, there's one photograph in the first few pages of my dad looking at his phone atop his motorcycle, and his motorcycle is black. And in the photograph on screen and even in print at home here, you can see all the detail of the motorcycle. Like, you can actually distinguish his face beneath his helmet, and even though it's like in slight shadow and that kind of deal. But in the first print of this zine, it was just nothing. Like, you could not make out any distinguishing details for the most part. Like, here and there, yes, but yeah. So I took photos of those, like a couple of those pages, sent them off over to SmartPress, who I used to print it, and they were like, "Oh yeah, this is no good."
Yeah.
So luckily they worked with me. We got it reprinted. It looks much, much better now.
That's good.
So so now I have 10 copies of this zine that look absolutely terrible, that I need to like do something with, probably use for starting fires. And other than that, I have 8 copies that I plan on probably putting up on my website or selling, doing something with, try to at least get my money back from the printing. So so if anybody wants a copy, I'll throw a link in the show notes so people can see if they're interested in it.
Very cool. Which style of binding did you end up using? They have like the saddle stitch. There's a perfect
It's
bound.
a perfect bound.
I think there might be some other. Okay, yeah, that's the same one that I used, which I really like the way that, because Smart Press is the same company I used to do my zine, and I really, they did a great job. I mean, everything is bound very well and everything, and I think the fact that my images are color and fairly low contrast,
Right.
made it where they translated very well to print, and there was no real surprises. And even like when I did the premium version that includes a print, that same image is partially on the cover as well. And then if you kind of compare the actual print to the image on the cover, you see that they're actually very, very close. So I think anytime you're doing offset printing, dark shadow tone is tricky because it can do really weird things.
Yeah.
So I think that is just where it got tricky with your images, just because of the rich contrast.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of those images, how I edited them, I knew that they were going to be dark, and I knew that they were going to be very contrasty. It's just that I'd never worked with offset printing or doing zines or any of this sort. I've only ever done anything at like my own printing at home. So
yeah,
it's very weird to give away that kind of that control of things and be like, here you go, here's this, print it off. Like, I could never imagine sending off quite regularly my files to outside labs to have them print work for me and send it off to clients directly without me seeing it beforehand.
Exactly.
Like that just bothers me.
Yeah.
But
when I see other, because I mean, it's a very common way for people to sell prints, but when I see photographers say that that's how they do it, I'm like, I could never do that. Because like, I need to see that print and make sure that it's fine, because otherwise you're putting your name on something and you don't really even get to see it. Yeah. So for me, that's why for me, it's never been an option even to do printing that way, just because I got to see it. Just like you, I have to see it to make sure everything's fine. And to have greater control over that process. But I mean, and the other thing too is like stuff like if, printing a zine, which the images will look fairly different depending on the paper you use, whether it's a glossy or a matte or coated or uncoated. I mean, there's some pretty significant differences there, but let alone when people are selling, let's say like metal prints or canvas prints or all these different mediums, and then they're just being printed through the lab and sent to the people, I would just die inside a little bit. I'm like, I can't do that. I gotta see it. Which I don't know. I would think that there'd be a bit more of of photographers wanting to see the stuff beforehand. Like, even if it's like, ship it to me and then I'll check it out, I'll close it back up, then I'll ship it personally to the buyer. But I don't know, maybe some people feel very confident in the labs, but I know I couldn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there are some really, really good labs out there, and it's like you get used to editing your photographs, I'm sure, in a certain way to make sure that everything looks good on your end and on their end, and that everything matches up. But I don't know. It's just not for me. Like, even sending out the very few times that I've done like 16 by 20 inch prints or something that I've sent out for having labs done. It's that week-long period where I'm just waiting for it to come back, and I'm just expecting there to be some kind of issue. Because like I said, I know how my printer prints. I know how everything looks on my side of things. And it's just, I don't know, it makes my life easier to just do it myself and to dial everything in myself, whether it's the quote-unquote right way of doing things or not. But I don't know.
Another thing I was thinking about when it comes to the trip I just went on. So when we're talking about in our previous episode, and I was saying how, I had the 5 images from Death Valley I was really happy with, and I was going into this trip with knowing that I already had a decent amount of work that I was happy with. It got me thinking a little bit about how I think working with large format is there's something about it where it takes a certain level of being hungry to find a subject, that if you really are motivated to find that subject, you have to have enough energy isn't the word I'm looking for. You have to have enough motivation to get over that threshold of, do I really want to set this camera? Do I really want to wait for the light? Do I really want to do all that? And when I went on this most recent trip, I didn't have as much motivation to find subjects. And there was very few times I really had the desire to set up the camera to, take a picture of something. And I was thinking about when it comes to having a digital setup as well, because there's that idea of, hey, these clouds are really fantastic right now. I could just go ahead and set up the camera and take a picture of them. If I had a digital one, it'd be so much easier. Because there was this, my final evening when I was in Death Valley, I had already gone for a bike ride that day, so I was kind of worn out. And there were the most amazing, beautiful clouds in the sky, like these feathery clouds. And I even took this video and I put it in a story on Instagram where I just kind of shows me sitting next to my Forerunner. You just see my feet. And I just start panning upward. I start panning upward so high that it's eventually the phone's behind me and you see like the ground coming in like upside down. But just the sky is filled with these beautiful clouds. And I'm like, I have no desire. I mean, they're beautiful. They're fantastic, but I have no desire to try to hunt for some way to photograph them with, the 8x10 camera that was 3 feet away from me in my Forerunner. But I was also thinking, like, even if I had a medium format digital, I still don't think I would have the desire to pull, even though it'd be very easy. I don't think I have that desire to create more work because I'm already very satisfied with the work that I've already created. So it's just kind of interesting to think that once I have enough of a level of satisfaction with the work that I've created, it's just like that. I shut off that switch and it doesn't matter how easy it would be to take photos if I had some different camera. I just don't really have the desire to. So it's this kind of interesting thing and allowed me to just enjoy the moment and just enjoy the scenery, to take it all in, but without having that feeling of, oh, I need to take a picture of this. So I think that's one of the things I love about working with the large format is that when you're hungry for images, you'll work for them, because you have to work for them. But once you're no longer hungry for those images, you just enjoy the scenery. And so I think that was another takeaway from this trip I just got back from.
But I don't think that necessarily is, I don't think that's entirely because of working with large format. Like it may be more conducive to that sort of mentality when you do have to take your time, where you're forced to take your time to set everything up and then take a photograph. Mm-hmm. But I think that more has to do with just call it creative or photographic maturity that you go through. The realization that not everything that is beautiful needs to be photographed by you. Like you don't need to photograph every single sunset that you see, or you can more easily just enjoy the moment and without having to take your camera out and document the fact that this moment happened. I think that's more of the factor that goes on there than what kind of gear you use. Because, like I said, the large format may help with that. It certainly does. But I'm much the same way with the Fuji kit. Like, I'll go out and, yes, I'm photographing a bit more often, but only because I'm photographing scenes that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to as easily. Like, there's a lot of my focus has been like on leaves suspended in water or ice. And I think that has to do with the camera coming from Andrew Barufi and that being his whole shtick.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
But something there is just like you touch the camera and you just feel a tingle and you're like, ooh, leaves.
Yes. I need some oil. With these leaves. Yes.
Yeah. Oil, ice, butterflies suspended in oil, something.
Yeah.
But
he finds such amazing things. Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm not I'm hungry for photographs, but I'm not going to overeat. if you want to continue with that analogy. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to constantly photograph every single little thing that I see just because it's so easy with digital. Because again, it goes back to that maturity that you gain as you are growing as a photographer. You get to a certain point where you're like, okay, well, why am I truly photographing nature? Is it to take away these photographs in nature, or is it to enjoy nature and the healing powers and such that it gives me? And for me, it's absolutely the healing powers of nature than just enjoying the moment over any photograph that I get. But
yeah. And I think like for the way that I do my trips where I have, several months go by between the trips, from the winter trip to the spring trip to the fall trip, I think in that time, as more time goes by, the more hungry I get in order to create images. And at that point, it builds up so much that I have the energy and I have the drive to pursue things with the large format camera. Because otherwise, I won't have just the motivation. If I just go out for the day somewhere locally, I'm not going to have the motivation to try to do what I have to do to work with that camera. But I think after going through that effort and having those pictures that turn out, it just suddenly like shuts off like a faucet in terms of like, I have no motivation now to go out and create new work. I already feel good about the stuff that I've made. But I guess what I was trying to say is that even if I had a different camera with me that was easy to work with, it's still that faucet has been shut off until it can slowly build back up again. And I think that with the difficulty and the hindrance of working with a large format, it just allows me to create that work I'm very satisfied with when that motivation is still high. And I know that I would do very well. Like if I had a medium format camera, digital camera, I would produce the work I'm very happy with then. But I feel like at a certain point, I don't know that faucet would shut off as fast. I think it's the large format that just makes that faucet shut off. And then I'm like, okay, I'm good. I don't have to do anything else. I can just enjoy it. Whereas I feel like it might trail off a little bit more if it was easier to create that work. So it's kind of a feast or famine, I think, when it comes to working with the large format, which then forces me to just enjoy the sights and the sounds, which I think was one of the takeaways from this trip. Another thing too, when we talked a couple episodes back, whenever it was, about the whole Zone 2 training, I have a hard time when I'm in the field being in a Zone 2 mindset in terms of just not working too hard, just going out and just doing the photography stuff. It's more of like a Zone 4 thing, which is when you're working away really hard. That's how I am on my photo trips. But I think at least once I'm satisfied with the work I've created, then it drops back to that Zone 2, just kind of enjoy the sights and sounds and everything else associated with it. So I don't know. It's interesting going on another trip when I was already quite satisfied with the work. But who knows? We'll see once I have the film developed and coming back from this one. Maybe there's something good there. Maybe it's just give me a lot of video of me walking around on a very windy day, which is probably what it'll be. But I don't know. Good times.
Yeah, but I think I mentioned something to you on Instagram a couple weeks back when I found this photographer, and kind of ties right into you saying about the large format process being more conducive to you and everything.
Yeah.
But I was trying to figure out the lens situation for the Fuji and how I could make it kind of more in line with large format. I came across this article on the online magazine On Landscape, and it's titled Using the Cambo Actus MV.
Yeah, I remember when you said that to me, yeah.
It's an article by a photographer, John Brock, and he was a large format photographer, and he's still around. So he is a large format photographer that's eventually turned to digital, but he didn't do it in like the traditional way. Like he found digital to be very difficult to work with going from film, kind of like what you and I have experienced before. Started off with a Sony. He says here, when in 2017, I decided to finally abandon film and hang up my TK bellows for good, I naturally hunted for a similar digital-based solution, and hunted, and hunted. I think I must have reached double figures trying to find the answer. Bolting a Sony onto the back of my TK worked for longer lenses, but nothing wider than 90 millimeters. A Pentax 645Z was nothing but frustration, unable to control focus with macro work. A Nikon 85 PC lens and 35mm Canon TS lens on a Sony gave some limited tilt shift options, but a terrible experience. The same can be said for a Sony, Mirix, and Contax lenses. It was so imprecise. I looked hard at a Linhof Techno, but it felt like it was designed in a bygone era and would push me into using digital backs. And then he goes on to explain how he found the GFX system and working with the Cambo Actis MV, which is essentially a kind of a combination, best of both worlds, where you're putting the GFX camera onto the back of a large format system, a little bit more compact, a little bit easier to work with than what it would be if you were actually doing that. Again, I'll put this in the show notes here, but I then went on to John's website, and his work is absolutely gorgeous. I have a link in the chat here if you didn't see it already, Ben, but
let me pull it up here.
The link that I sent you takes to the his aspects of beauty abstract work that he has, and each photograph has a little story or some text to it, and it tells you what it was made with, whether it is Linhof 4x5 kit or one of his newer digital setups that he has. But I mean, I would love to have the same setup as what he does, where you have that Cambo Actis MV. Like, I definitely think that is the best of both worlds, because you're able to then use your large format lenses with it, or a variety of different lenses with it, and you're getting the benefits of the digital sensor. But the cost is very, very prohibitive. You're looking at, I think it's like $3,600 for that setup. That doesn't include the camera or the lenses that you would need for it. Yeah. So it's his work is very film-like in terms of the subject matter, the presentation. So it definitely does. I can see how it allows him to keep working the way that he was working before, with, you know, similar subject matter and the same style of working. And also, like, a lot of the subjects are in subdued light, which is the way that I like to photograph as well, which is very film friendly. But with digital, you know, one doesn't necessarily have to stay within the subdued light, but it is such beautiful light, and it's something that you can tell that it was produced by a person who has a history with working with film. Because I think that sort of light, the average person may not think too much of it when seeing it in person, seeing those scenes, but just the subtlety of the different, you know, tones coming from different directions, that I think is something that would be found more in like from the eye of a photographer who's worked with film before. Yeah, I absolutely love the photograph that he has in this gallery here, chestnuts. And in his little text that he has, he says, "I found these wonderful chestnuts out on a walk with my father at Buttermere." And it was in the Lake District in October of 2022 that he photographed it. And I just love that thought, though, too, of he took this with the GFX on the Cambo Actis MV with a 120 millimeter Nikkor large format lens. And just to think that, like, it's not like John is super young. So I can only imagine that his father is probably in his late 70s, 80s, somewhere around that area.
Yeah.
And he just decides that he's going to bring along this Cambo Actus system and take a photograph of these chestnuts. An absolutely beautiful photograph, but nonetheless, it just puts a funny image in my head. It's just, but I mean, like I said, if I had the money for it, I would absolutely get a setup like this because I think it would be the best of both worlds.
Yeah, that's really nice. The other one that really catches my eye is this tree buttermere, where it's like the roots of this tree, and then there's some water flowing in the foreground.
Okay, yeah.
And just the structure of the image, the sort of inverted Y shape, sort of triangular formation, and just all the nice, looks like it had been raining, and then there's some really nice light reflecting off some of the roots. A very dimensional look to it. It's weird, looking at his work, for whatever reason, reminds me of when I was first getting into photography. There was some new camera that came out, and I don't remember what this was, but back in the day, and photographers were posting work from these new digital cameras. But I think this commonality that I see here is that those initial images that I had seen way back when were taken by film photographers because digital was so new. But there's just something about the tones of it that just reminds me a lot of that way back when. So it's definitely very, very interesting to see. So I think that's very fantastic work here. Browsing through some of the other categories as well, the Lake District, and again, some very, 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 very cool work.
I tried reaching out to him. I don't know if he got my email. I'll have to ping him back again because I had a couple questions about his using the Cambo Actus, but absolutely gorgeous work. Very glad that I found especially his abstracts that he has on here, the various galleries that he has. There's one called Mulgrave under that collection there. That has a really nice, interesting type of photographs.
Yeah. Well, that's a fantastic suggestion. Is he on Instagram or anything?
I don't.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, right. So you see,
I see.
You see that, but it links to Wix.
Yeah, I just noticed that. I'm like, oh, wow.
Even and I said this.
It was just the default one, I guess.
Right. Even in his email, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, it says info@johnbrockphoto.com. But it's when you click on that, it pops up in the email info@mysite.com. The mail to
so, clearly a template that was used, but not overly modified for all the current stuff.
Yeah. But so.
But yeah, that's a fantastic suggestion. Yeah, definitely. People should go check out his work. John Brock Photo, JON brockphoto.com. Very, very fantastic work. And the main picture, when you go to his website, I don't even really know what I'm looking at on the first picture. There's like the slideshow that shows up. I have no clue what I'm looking at, but it's very cool. Like with like the light blue, then dark blue, then I don't know what I'm looking at. Something ice or oil or something, I don't know, but it's really cool. It looks like there's like almost human figures in the bottom. Very, very cool. I hope you enjoyed our creative banter. You can learn more about Cody's work by visiting his website, codyschultz.com. And you can find my work at benhorn.com. For further discussion, join us at patreon.com/creativebanter. It's a place where we can interact with you, the listener. And although we greatly appreciate those who contribute by joining a tier, discussions are open to everyone, whether you're a paying member or not. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you around next time.